out some notes of encouragement.
Yes.
On a more regular basis.
Absolutely. That's exactly what, this the little things. It's just the little things that you could do that would be helpful. And as a staff, it can't just be from the administration. It has to be the entire staff has to understand. If you've got a sunshine committee, a little note, a little something extra for them, just we're thinking about you. Administratively, show them a little extra support. So yeah, this is a tough time of year. It really is. All right. So next week's Thanksgiving break, no Zoom. Get caught up with your family. Hopefully you're caught up with your evidence artifacts. Tonight we're going to do accounting budgeting. Tonight we had 3 discussion boards that go along with that one. Interview an administrator about fundraising. Locate a copy of your school budget and the 5 most important steps in school-based budgeting. I've enjoyed reading those. I would suggest looking at discussion board 11, and if you've already done it, don't redo it, but looking at that one, and it says interview an administrator. Some of you have interviewed like the school secretary or treasurer, the bookkeeper. That's fine, but a little later tonight, I'm going to talk about why it's important to talk with the administrator about fundraising and about budgeting and those kinds of things to get a bigger picture look at those kinds of things. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But no, what you've done is fine. But, we need to look at the micro and macro. Micro, we talked to the bookkeeper about how we do the accounts. Macro, we look at the theory behind how and why we use the money. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later tonight. But that's what we cover tonight. Quickly, let's look at where we are. Let me close that one. With our evidence artifacts, this is week 11. You should be working on skip task 2. I had a question, I think Nadej asked, do you have to do tasks 3 and 4? If you want to go ahead and knock those out now, but they're not due until next semester. But if you're rolling, keep going. Don't let me slow you down. No, they're not due till next semester. I would like to point out one thing about some of the skip 2s that I'm seeing so far. So let me go to our scale handbook. So for task 2, the prompt is the candidate should lead a team to identify the fiscal and human resources necessary to complete the skip. Those are the short and long-term objectives that you identified in task 1. So funding necessary, and then resource would require to identify human capital. This is a small point, but it's very important. I need for you to talk about dollars here. When we talk about funds, talk about dollars. How much it's going to cost. One of the things you need to learn about budgeting is I was in discussion with Bruce Boyles today, and one of the things that the collaborative group, the EDLS group met yesterday evening. We get feedback from stakeholders. My group is a principals group, and I get feedback from them about working with you folks, but we get feedback from superintendents as well. And that is one of the things that the superintendents talk about is that, there is a need for actual knowledge of dollars and cents, not just we're going to use these funds. Well, how much money is it? Where are we going to get it from, and those kinds of things. So when you identify the fiscal resources, you should tell us, A, how much money it's going to take to do these things, and B, where you're going to get it from. you should be able to identify those things. And then the second half of that one is when we talk about human capital, don't put teacher or staff or who the person's name or the position of that title of that person, who's going to do who, what, where, and when. Those are they sound like minor points, but those are two things that if we don't have funds available, if we don't know how much something's going to cost, or if we don't know exactly who's going to do it, the chances of it getting done are none. They're not slim. They're none. And that's one of the things that the superintendent's commented on is in this preparation program, you need to understand that a lot of what you have to do as an administrator is sell, and we're going to talk about this later tonight, is sell your vision. And part of selling your vision to the staff and the community is knowing your numbers and knowing what people and what you're going to have. It's not a good idea to sell your staff and community on a program that you've got money for, but then you've got no personnel that are qualified to implement it. Oh, that's not good. And so they sound like minor. That sounds like minor points, but that's not minor points. That's part of the micro political consideration of finances. Is a lot of times your job is going to be to sell your vision or the school's vision or what you want to do, and you can't sell without knowing your numbers. Now, my wife is a big Shark Tank fan. I'm not, but she is, and so it's on in the house all the time. So you know who's in charge of my place. And that's one of the things that I hear those guys and gals on Shark Tank say all the time to the people that walk in there trying to sell their vision. And that's what they're doing on Shark Tank, is the TV show, is they're trying to sell their vision. And the first thing you hear all of them say is, you got to know your numbers. Well, that's true in our business 1,000%. Just like, because you're doing the selling job, just like those people that are coming in Shark Tank. You're doing the selling job with your community, both your staff and your school community. And you got to know your numbers, and you got to know what resources you have in terms of personnel. It doesn't do any good to convince people to do a program, short-term or long-term objectives, if you don't have the wherewithal to pull those off. That's not good for your career longevity to make those mistakes. So you need to get in the habit early of identifying how many dollars it is, even if you have the dollars, how many dollars it is, and where you're going to get them from. Understanding that when you file a school budget for your school improvement plan, you have to have a budget that goes along with it. You can't put anything in your school improvement plan that you don't have the dollars for. Let me say that again. You can't put anything in your school improvement plan that you don't have the dollars in hand. If it's, pending funding, it doesn't go in there because there's no guarantee you're going to get the money. So you need to get in the habit of identifying the money and the personnel. And one personal story for you. Many years ago in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, we had a program called the High School Challenge. We had 3 low-performing high schools, and we were running a program called the High School Challenge. And it became a big political issue, and the county commissioners eventually forced it to be defunded because it was $6 million. But what people didn't understand, and what the leadership in the district failed to communicate to both the commissioners and to the public at large, is $6 million was less than half of 1% of the total budget of the district. The budget at that time, the district, was $1.4 billion with a B. $6 million was 0.4 of 1%. Was less than 1% of the budget, and you would have thought that $6 million was all the money that we had. And so the problem is that figure wasn't communicated up front in the decision-making process. And then when the bill came due at $6 million, it wasn't communicated that this is, 0.4% of our budget is all this is. It represents a very small amount. It sounds like a lot of money, but in relationship to the $1.4 billion budget, it doesn't represent a lot. So there was two mistakes made with that program. Number one, we didn't tell people up front the exact cost. When we sold them on the idea of the high school challenge, we didn't tell them the exact cost. And then when the bill came due and they saw how much it was, we didn't put that in context of the budget. Those are the kinds of things that smart administrators do. I didn't say we were smart in the central office. I just said I was in the central office. I didn't say we were smart. So that was a lesson well learned. And so it works kind of the same way. The microcosm of that district is at your school. You have to be a little bit smarter. If you know something might be controversial, you need to let people know all the facts up front. If you're going to have to hire additional personnel or going to have to do some contract hiring and bring people in, people need to know that. You need to make that clear up front. Or if you have personnel on hand that can do these things, that helps, and you need to let folks know exactly who's going to do what, where, and when. And the time for telling who's going to do who, what, where, and when is not when you introduce the program to the public and the person that's going to have to do it doesn't know. I've seen that happen as well. And you're standing there and all of a sudden, oh, by the way, Dale's going to do this, and Dale didn't know anything about it. And so it's involvement and communication and partnerships is what we're talking about here. You're a partner with your school staff and your school community. You need to keep them in mind. And that's part and parcel of identifying the fiscal and human capital resources. That's part and parcel of being a real partner with your stakeholders. And that's really what this evidence artifact is about teaching you how to be a partner with your staff and with your community. So make sure that when you get to task 2 that you include that. Questions about task 2? When we meet again, I'll cover CAP 1 again. Please remember, don't overdo CAP task 1. CAP task 1 is just about 5 areas of the teacher working condition survey. And again, they are empowerment, which is teacher leadership, which is school leadership, facilities, resources, and time. Those are the 5 areas. Make sure that you're consistent with those 5 areas all the way through. Don't just do an analysis of those 5 and then jump to student conduct in task 2. No, you can add that if you do add it in task 1. Let me say that again. If you feel that school conduct, management of student conduct, which is one of the areas of the teacher working conditions survey, if you feel like that's necessary or needed at your school, go ahead and add to those 5 in task 1. Don't let it show up somewhere later. Or what happens too many times is that's the only thing we go forward with. No, we go forward with all 5, and if we want to add 1 or 2, we can do that. But don't surprise us when we get to read the task 2. We're looking for time, resources, facilities, leadership, and empowerment. We're looking for those, and all we find is managing student conduct. Don't surprise your readers or your graders. That's not good. All right. So that covers that. Any questions about evidence artifacts? Hopefully you're all on pace. You're finishing up skip task 1 this week. I'm moving to skip task 2. I just read Kevin's task 2. Very good. And so I know that hopefully that's where you all are. Let me clear some of these things off. All right. The first thing I want to start with tonight, since this is a law and finance course, I want to start with the law. So here we go. Here are the relevant laws. Remember, all the public school laws, all 545 of them, can be found under North Carolina General Statute 115C, 1 through 545. So let's look at the one specific to the budget. 115C 288, powers and duties of the principal. One of your duties as principal is to make available school budget and school improvement plans. And the reason why they have those two together is not accidental. I've said this to you before. The school budget must support the school improvement plan. They must work like this. You can't have a school budget that says we're going to spend our money on this, but your school improvement plan says these are the things that are important for us to work on this year. There can't be a disconnect between the two. That's why in the OMA and Task 1, we ask you to make sure to find out how much input the school leadership team has in budgeting. You say, well, what's that got to do with the schedule and those things and school improvement? It has everything. You can't do school improvement. You can't unless you can fund it. And so there has to be a marriage between what your school improvement plan says you're going to do and what your budget plans to do and what your budget funds. And so the principal has to make those two things available. So anybody interested, a parent or any interested party that comes to your school and says, I'd like to see your budget and your school improvement plan, and the purpose would be to make sure that one supports the other, you have to be able to supply those as a principal, and they better match. They better match. Now, I get students every semester that say, well, my principal says those aren't public information. Yes, they are. The law says they are. Read it right there. Remember, I'm trying to train you the right way to be a school administrator, the legal way. I know that certain districts, especially rural districts, they do things how they want to. That's all well and good. I've told you 1,000 times. It's all fun and games till somebody gets their eye put out, until something goes wrong. And it doesn't matter that we've been doing it that way for 1,000 years. You're the one now in charge, and nobody can give you permission to break the law. And so, yes, but budgets are public information, and your school improvement plan is public information, and they better match. If not, there's going to be trouble. Somebody, parents are getting much more educated, informed, stakeholders, the news media, those kinds of things. Whenever there's questions, that's the first place they start, is looking at those two documents. They better be, your house better be in order, and it better not be that, oh, we don't give those out. Yeah, you do. All right. Shall allow parents of children in the school and other interested persons to review and obtain such documents. All right, so that's as clear as it gets. All right. 438, provision of disbursement of state money. Deposit money in the state treasury to the credit of local school administrative units shall be made in monthly installments. All right, let me explain that. When it becomes public knowledge how much you're going to be funded per student, when the General Assembly sets the budget in the summertime, and the per pupil expenditure for the state of North Carolina, let's just round it off to a nice even number of $7,000. You're going to get paid, the local district is going to get reimbursed $7,000 for every student in attendance. And so what that means is this: you have to have enough operating money as a district. You have to have enough operating money on hand to pay for the first month of school, not including state salaries or federal salaries. Remember, who are federal employees? CTE, Title I, EC, AIG, ESL. Those are all federally funded positions. You don't have to, and then you have your state positions. You do have to have enough money on hand, obviously, to fund any local positions that are hired in your district, but you'll have to have that money. The state will never reimburse that money. If you have locally hired positions that come out of local budget, obviously you have to have that money for every month, but you have to have enough operating money to operate for the first month of school. And then at the end of the first month at school, electronically, through Power School, you file what is known as the PMR, the Principal Monthly Report, and that's an attendance report. And so if you've got 1,000 students in your school, and you had 95% attendance for the 20 days of the school month, that would be 95%. You would get 95%, your school would bring in for the district 95% of that total. So if you were to get $7,000 per pupil, you only get the 7,000 for the 950 kids that showed up at your school. Even though you have 1,000 on the roll, the state doesn't pay for kids that don't come to school. They only pay for average daily membership, ADM. So that's why it's important to get your attendance in. That's why it's important that you follow up and you make sure kids are in school, because you don't get paid for them unless they come. So, you only get reimbursed at the end of the first month. The state cuts a check for the kids that showed up for the first month. So you have to have enough funds on hand to operate the first month. And then the state only reimburses, they only reimburse at the level of attendance, average daily membership. And it comes in monthly installments. So many times the general public and the uninitiated think that $7,000 comes in August. No, it comes $700 at a time. They divide it up into 10 monthly installments. They do not give you this whole $7,000 up front. They give it to you $700 at a time for the 10 months. That's called the modified accrual system of accounting. And they only reimburse legitimate expenses. And so if you didn't spend the money as the code, as it was supposed to be spent and what it was supposed to be spent for, the state will not reimburse that. Before an installment is credited, the school finance officer shall certify to the state Board of Education the expenditures be made by the local from the public fund during the month. What I just said, what that means is that we certify that we spent the money correctly. Your district finance officer does that, and they have to show proof that they spent the money correctly, and then the state reimbursement. Then it has the certification be filed before the 5th day of the following end of the month preceding period in which expenditures was made. The state board shall determine whether money is requisitioned or due the local administrative unit. They'll check. They have auditors that check and make sure that what you're telling them that you spent was appropriate to be spent. And then they'll cut the check. So that's how it works. That's how district funding in North Carolina works. Again, it's called the modified accrual accounting system. They only reimburse what you spent. You have to have the money up front to run schools for at least a month. They reimburse it. They only reimburse it 1/10 of the total amount per month, 10 monthly installments. And they only reimburse legitimate expenses, things that are within the rules of how the money should be spent. It's based on average daily membership, not on enrollment. So kids that don't come to school cost you money. All right. Accounting system. Each local school district or LEA shall establish and maintain an accounting system designed to show in detail its assets, liabilities, equities, revenues, expenditures. And again, it's called the modified accrual basis of accounting. And the reason why you have to show all those things is to prove to the state what you spent and that you spend legitimate expenditures so that you can get your money reimbursed. If you can't do that, they won't give it back to you. All right. 115C 445. This one is specific to you folks as aspiring school level administrators, and some of you already are. And this is daily deposits. This is 115C 445. This has nothing to do with your school district. This is every school district. And no, your school district cannot have a policy that's different from this one. All monies collected shall be deposited daily. Daily. You can't carry money over. If it's receipted today, it has to be deposited today. That means if you have teachers who receipt money, they have to turn it into the office and receipt it at the office, and then that money has to be deposited that same day, every day. If you know anything about schools, if you hung around the office any, you know that usually your financial secretary leaves every afternoon at a certain time to go to the bank. And that's the way it works. You cannot keep money overnight. I know some of the when I first started teaching school, building wasn't that old then. It was built in 1926. That sounds very ancient, but it wasn't that old then. It was still a relevant building, but we had a safe in the main office, but it was unused because these financial accounting procedures were put in. And so the safe they used it just as a storage unit because it was already there in the building. But no, you can't just lock it in the safe. It doesn't work that way. Also, I think it's. We'll get to we got another one here in a minute, but and ticket money falls under the same category. One of the things that I had to do as a high school principal was pay one of the resource officers that was there at the ball games to escort the ticket, the head ticket taker at the ball. You have to sell tickets and keep an accounting of how many people that you sell tickets to at sporting events. You have to get tickets and keep those ticket stubs, and you have to reconcile the ticket stubs with the amount of money at the end of the night. And then I would have to pay extra for a resource officer to go with the financial secretary to make a night deposit and a drop deposit at night. So even like on Friday night ball games, if you charge admission, you have to sell tickets. You have to reconcile the tickets with the cash, and then you have to take and do a night deposit drop that night. It has to be in that night. Can't wait till the next morning. It has to go in that night. All right. Annual independent audit. Each spring, you will be audited. All of your books at your school will be audited. All accounts will be audited. State money, federal money, local money, school money, school accounts, fundraisers. All of those will be audited annually. Now, one of the things I had you do was talk to your school administration about fundraising. Some of you indicated that, well, the PTA does most of some or all of our fundraising, and they have their own account. And so let me explain something to you about PTA fundraising. You can delegate the activity, but not the responsibility. Say that again. You can delegate the activity of fundraising to your PTA, but not the responsibility financially. They have to follow the same rules. You are charged with fiscal control of them. If the money all gets gone from the PTA, the central office will come knocking at your door, and you will be charged with failure to maintain fiscal control. Now, you'll have the opportunity to defend yourself, and hopefully you can. But this notion that if I delegate it to PTA, I delegate the responsibility legally, fiscal responsibility to them, you do not. Even if they have their own account, you still have not. You have to maintain control of that. So you need to make sure you know what they're doing with their money, and that they're audited along with your books, that theirs are audited in the spring as well. If they keep a separate set of books for their fundraising activities in your PTA, you must demand that they turn their books over every spring when you turn yours over. That may not be happening in your school district, and there may not be any problem, but let the money get gone, and there's going to be a problem, and it's going to be at your doorstep, not the PTA's. It's going to be at yours if the money gets gone. Even if they maintain their own account, they still must follow the same financial rules that you have to follow, and they need to be audited every spring right along with you, because we know there seems to be more cases of PTA, embezzling the money than not, unfortunately. So you need to make sure that you are enforcing upon them the same rules that are enforced upon you, and that they are audited every spring as well. Okay, and if you run a second set of books or running things off the books, Class 1 misdemeanor will cost you your license as a school administrator and your job. So that's what we're talking about here. I have seen principals try to run off the books through PTA. That's not legal, and you will lose your license and your job. All right, special funds 448. Every school has a treasurer, has a financial secretary, and they're supposed to do all of the bookkeeping, make the reports to the superintendents and the finance officer of your district. And checks have to be signed by both the principal and the treasurer. No matter how many accounts you've got at your building, if you've got 1 or 2 or 3, all checks have to be signed by the principal and the treasurer. Which begs the question: what about booster club? What about band booster? What about athletic booster? The smart principal runs that through the school just like everything else. Again, if you let them run their own accounts and something goes wrong, you're going to be held responsible by the people who employ you. I would make sure that, I always ran the accounts through the school and I signed the checks. That way I knew what was being spent. All right. And it talks about special funds include funds realized from gate receipts, sales, school annuals, newspapers, dues of student organizations. That's why it has those there, because for some reason people think those things don't fall under the rules. What does the law say? Yes, they do. Those things fall under the rules the same as all the rest of your funds. And that's why that addendum was put in there later on. Folks argued, well, that was ball games. That's athletics, or annuals and newspapers. That was separate. We had a separate group that did that. We ran student organizations, and they're the ones who did the fun. No, all that stuff is also part and parcel of the school budget. All right. Okay. 524, repair of school property, use of buildings for other than school purposes. This is the one you get into a lot in high school. You should have in your district a community use of schools, and everything in terms of renting out your facility should go through them. You should not get involved in lending or loaning school businesses, school properties for groups that come in. Although they may be legitimate community groups, you should run everything through community use of school. You don't want the liability of what happens if somebody gets hurt or if damage occurs to your facility. You need to run all those things through that, through your community use of schools. You have to keep up your facilities. And so that's part and parcel of that. You can't allow your teachers to run private business out of your school. One of my concerns is bringing things, selling things at school. If you've got some kind of a side business, that's not allowable. If somebody's selling, I don't know, Mary Kay Cosmetics, and they come and put the book in the faculty lounge, that's a no-no. That's not allowable. They're using public facility for a private business. That one is that, people say, well, that's a gray area. No, it's not gray. It's not gray at all. Now, it's not as in your face as one that I inherited one time as a high school principal, where the photography teacher was running a private business out of the photography lab, using it to develop all the film and selling the pictures. It's not as in your face as that one is. But again, you have to be careful. You can't allow people to bring my kid's selling this and my kid's selling that. No, we can't allow for that either. And we can't allow, I've got a private business selling organic cleaning products. Can I bring the magazines to school and put them in the lamp? No. Or put notices in teachers' mailboxes? No, you can't do that. The law is very clear that you can't allow You can't allow people to run a private business out of a public facility. Now, here's a real life story for you, and I'm going to use names. I interviewed this young man for an assistant principal position. I think it was maybe, I want to say, I'll just use a round figure, probably 1995. It could have been a year or two either side of that, but let's say 1995. And he was a really nice young man. I did not hire him at the high school because he had not been, but I did recommend him for a middle school job, and he got a middle school assistant principalship, and he did really well. He was a very nice young man, very bright, very on the ball. I didn't hire him, but I sat on the committee for the middle school as well, and so I recommended him for a middle, and he got hired as a middle school AP. Did a fabulous job as a middle school AP for, 2 or 3 years. And then we recommended him, and he got a middle school job. He got a middle school job. He got a middle school principal. And his name was Jerry. Jerry's a great guy. By all accounts, he's doing a fabulous job as a middle school principal. Everything's going well. And he's still fairly young, which is relevant to the story. And that in the community where he became principal, he got involved with a group of the dads there, middle school age kids, and they were all, mid-30s to about 40, still, thought that they were young enough that they could play sports. And so they formed a little group, a flag football team. And so since Jerry was the principal and he was on the team and that played on Saturdays, they didn't bother to go through community use of schools to use the ball field on Saturdays to play their little flag football game. Well, Jerry went out for a pass and dove for a ball and fell and broke his neck. I don't mean a little bit. I mean, basically paralyzed from his nose down. The only thing that he could move was his eyes. I can't make this up, and it's such a tragic story. Such a tragic story. Great guy, young family, young kids, middle school age kids, or elementary and middle school age kids. Wasn't even 40 years old. Was like 37, 38 years old. Great guy, great potential as an administrator. Next thing you know, he's paralyzed from the nose down. But here's the bad part. Remember I said he didn't, but because he was principal at the school, he didn't bother to have his group do a community use of schools. His insurance didn't want to pay. The district, no liability on the district, no workman's comp. They said it wasn't on the job, no community use of schools. If it had been community use of schools, he could have claimed that he was there as supervision. It did not go well. A truly tragic story, that a lot of that pain and suffering financially could have been avoided had he done community use of schools. And so there is no group so insignificant that you shouldn't send them through. Oh yeah, you're just going to do a car wash up out front. Yeah, come on. No, everything needs to go through community use of schools. So all the proper paperwork and insurance and legal is done in case somebody gets hurt, in case something gets broken. That is absolutely a true story. It happened at Ransom Middle School in Charlotte. And Jerry, not a finer person in the world than him. But that's a lesson learned kind of thing. Don't let that happen to you. Community use of schools is real. You need to make sure that you understand that you're just a steward of a public institution. Even though your name's on the door, it's not on the deed. And you need to treat it as such. And so you can see here, all these things are your responsibility as principal. Can't let kids run wild and tear the facility up. You can be held liable for that as well. All that's here in 524. And so local boards of education may adopt rules and regulations under which they may enter into agreements permitting non-school groups to use real and personal property. That's community use of schools, but that's up to them. All right. All right. Erection of school buildings, 521. I told you in 1966, North Carolina got out of the school building business and they left it up to the local board of education. Problem is that in North Carolina, local boards of education, there are 114 of them. There's 100 county systems in each of the 100 counties, and there are 14 city districts still left in the state of North Carolina. Just above where I am tonight in Mooresville, there's one there. There's one in Welborn. There's a few city systems left, but there's 114 of those. Understanding that they are all unempowered. What that means is they can't levy their own taxes. They have to go to the county commissioners in the county. They have to go to the city council in the cities to get their money. And that's who provides the money for facilities. And so you need to understand that you're not going to get any state money to fix up things or to buy computers. Computers are considered to be property. And you have to use capital funds, capital with an A. Capital is buildings and grounds facilities. You have to use capital money for computers as well, because that's considered to be part of that. So you need to understand that there's no state money coming for computers. There's no state money coming for buildings. It's all at the local level, and you have to take care of it because there is no money coming from the state to bail you out. The lottery money is a myth. It's a hoax. It's not coming to help you out. So you got to take care of what you've got. Now, when I'm asked from time to time, why is it that charter schools in your counties get all the old mobile units, unused mobile units from your public school district? Well, 521 right here is why. It says very clearly, it's the duty of the local board of education to provide classroom facilities. It doesn't say buildings. It doesn't say buses. It doesn't say it says classroom facilities. And so to meet the letter of the law, when a charter school starts in your county, which is a public separate, but it is a public school, it is the local board of education's responsibility or the county commissioner's responsibility to fund them classrooms. And so what they do is give them old used mobile units. And that's how all these startup charter schools end up with these mobile units. If you ever wanted to know why, you can tell somebody now it's 115C 521. That's how come they get the mobile units. Because it's up to the local, not the state, to give them a building or classrooms. It's up to the local, and all the local has to do is give them classrooms. And mobile unit satisfies that requirement, and so that's why they get the mobile units. All right. It is the duty of boards of education to make the public school term by providing adequate school buildings. That's for the county or the city districts, not for charter schools. They only have to give them classrooms. And so right here, as you can see, you will be funded. Your facilities are only funded from your local. There is no state money coming. So one of the first things that, neophyte administrators, well, where's our state money? We need some some maintenance done in our building, or we need some new desks, or we could certainly use some new technology. What state code is what's the code for the state fund for that? There isn't one. It's all local. And it's all negotiable with the central office and the school board in your district. There is no state money coming, and that's an important thing to know from that. And that's clearly what the law says. All right, I've got some individual board policies. Remember, we start with federal law, we go to state law. We've already looked at the federal law for EC and 504 and all those things. We had you do that. We had you look at all that stuff. I've covered the relevant state funding laws tonight. And the reason why we didn't cover federal funding, because we're not a part of federal funding. They pay those people directly and they fund those programs. We're not a part of that. And so we understand how the federal works. I just covered the state funding laws and how that works. Now you have, number 3 on the list always is your local. Now, I brought this one up from Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, but as it says here, you have similar policies in your LEA, local education, your LEA, your local education administration, or your school district, as we commonly refer to them. You will have some laws like this in your LEA as well. And the first one says you have to follow the state accounting system, modified accrual accounting system, that you have to follow that, and that you have to receipt, and you have to use purchase orders, and that rules and regulations for fundraising are developed by the superintendent and staff. And what all of you have written in your response to fundraising is that, and you all have figured this out, the superintendent's office has to approve all fundraisers. That's a policy in every district in the state of North Carolina, is that all fundraising must be approved by the superintendent's office. And it says so right here in the policy. And your district has a policy that says the same thing. All receipts for individual schools will be handled just like the way the state law says it will be. It'll be receipted every day and deposited every day. You'll have regulations on fundraising, and this is what you were supposed to look up in Charlotte Mecklenburg. Principal has to approve it, and then the superintendent has to be approved. And you have to submit your proposal during the first of anticipated fundraising activities in the first month of school, and then the principal has to pass those on to the superintendent by the end of the first month of school. And then that you have your recommended ones that the district wants to see. Charlotte Mecklenburg, they want to see art festivals, carnivals, dances, car washes, barbecues, concert films, and student faculty games. You don't see candy sales in there, or those kinds of things. They're telling you up front what they will approve. Now, if you're smart, you won't do an end run and have the PTA do a candy fundraiser. That's not smart. This is what they'll support. Principal has to approve any fundraising that might take away instructional time. And if you're a principal and you're smart, you won't approve any of that. You can't trade state dollars, federal dollars that you can't control for local fundraising dollars that you can control. And let me explain that theory to you. Who pays teacher salaries? Either the federal government through CTE teachers, Title I teachers, special ed teachers, AIG teachers, ESL teachers. The federal government pays their salary. Who pays your regular classroom teacher salary? The state of North Carolina. They pay those salaries with the expectation that they will use their time instructionally. So what principals, especially in the old days, used to do is I don't have any, I don't have much of an opportunity to raise money. I don't have a PTA. I'm in a low wealth area. What I'll do is I'll use my teachers to do fundraisers, and we'll take instructional time that's been paid for by federal and state dollars, and I'll get me some money that I have control of, some local, school-based dollars here, and I'll use all this free labor I've got here because somebody else is paying them. I'll use all this free labor in the form of teachers and the staff of the school to do some fundraising. Well, that's a really bad exchange. Number one, you're using somebody else's money, which is against the law, number one. But number two, if we looked at it from a purely economic standpoint, we spend hundreds of dollars for every one of state and federal money in terms of salaries for every dollar that we raise locally. It's a really bad exchange if we just looked at it from the financial aspect. But number two, it's illegal to be using those people to be raising money, taken away from instructional time. When we pay teachers, our expectation is that they're using that time for instruction, not for fundraising. So in Charlotte Mecklenburg, the use of instructional time for the purposes of fundraising shall not take place without approval of the principal. And basically what that means, there might be some extraneous something in times of crisis or something like that, but otherwise, no. Instruction-related activities such as auto mechanics, tailoring, cosmetology should not be used for fundraising. it should not be used for a private business for the auto mechanics teacher, the tailoring, cosmetology, or the photography teacher either. They should not be running a private business. They shouldn't be tuning up cars in the school shop for money, for themselves, or or as a fundraiser. That's not appropriate. That's not what those things are there for. Again, you're trading the staff time for local control of local dollars, and it's a bad trade. Pre-numbered tickets have to be used for athletic contests, have to be accounted for. You have to do a reconciliation before the night's over. As soon as you close down ticket sales, Jamie would always take the box inside, count the tickets and count the money and make sure they matched, and then Isaac would escort her to the bank to make the night drop. He was our regular SRO, school resource officer. Same thing at the junior high when I was principal there. Morton would take Todd. Todd was my financial secretary there, and Todd would do the reconciliation of the ticket takers, get all of their tickets and get all their money, do the reconciliation, fill out the form, and Steve Morton, the SRO, would take him to the bank. I mean, that's just the way it works. When you're at a place. Now, when I was a middle school principal, we didn't charge for athletic concept, but junior high and senior high we did. And so mostly that's just going to be your junior and senior highs. A lot of you have gone to middle schools and you don't charge at middle school, and so you're not going to have that problem. But if you're at junior or senior high and you charge, you're going to have to do accounting on your tickets. Every district has that same policy. Bagged and put in the night depository. In no case shall proceeds be left at school or taken home overnight. Receipts shall be deposited in the school account on a daily basis. Use of funds raised. All funds must be raised to benefit the school program. Must be part of the budget. Must support the school improvement plan. All funds shall be used project designated prior to the fundraising. Again, has to be in the budget. What you're going to use it for, and that has to support the school improvement plan. Right here is what I was talking about, Mary Kay. Except as expressly authorized in writing by the superintendent. All employees are prohibited from soliciting or selling any non-school authorized item during work time or any work area. Selling, trading, distributing, or dealing in instructional supplies, equipment, or reference books. And you can't compete with the district. You can't be a vendor. If you work for the district, there's a non-compete clause. You can't be a vendor to the district. But this one right here is very clear. It's a local policy. Every district's got it. No soliciting or selling unless the superintendent expressly permits it. Principal can't even prove that one. Has to be the superintendent.
Dr. Lamb,
yes.
We had an issue last year before with Teachers Pay Teachers. Just a little program where you buy lesson plans or one thing or another, and they actually banned that, and you were not. It was actually you couldn't access it on school computers. Mm-hmm. Is that tied into that because it was actually paying for things that were being sold at school time?
Yes. Well, it violated two of these. Number one, it violated no selling during the school time, but it also violated your non-compete clause. You not supposed to be doing something that's in competition with the school district.
Okay. And
so that was a double whammy on that one. Yeah. No, that one was wrong on coming and going. That one wasn't a good one. But that's an excellent example of what I'm talking about. Things that you wouldn't even think about. Things that nobody complained about. Nobody complains about Mary Kay. If you don't want Mary Kay cosmetics, don't buy them. But again, it opens the door for liability issues. And again, use of public facilities to make private gain, can't do that. Then the next thing again, the auto mechanics teacher, he's wanting to tune up a few cars over the weekend, making a little extra money. No, that's not what those facilities are paid. That's not what they're there for.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Can you just go back to how? Can you help me understand how is that competing with the local school board? The example that I think Melissa just mentioned, or was it?
All right, I hear DeWall somewhere. I can't see him, but okay.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
You
Kimberly, I think
understand
Kimberly
that?
mentioned it.
Do you understand that when I was in the central office, and not just because I was there, but you understand that the central office makes money off vendors?
Okay.
Those people that come out and sell you like annuities and do financial services and those kind, you realize that they pay the district to do that.
Okay, I'm at a charter, so we're
yeah,
slightly
you're in charter.
different.
You're different. Yeah, I get that, DeWalt. I mean, you're in charter. But traditional, the 114 traditional public school districts in North Carolina, people have to pay, vendors have to pay access fees to come in and sell their wares to our employees. And so when you're an employee in one of the 114 traditional districts, there's a non-compete clause that means that you can't sell life insurance because we're getting paid for MetLife to come in and sell life insurance. So there's a non-compete clause. You can't compete with any of the vendors that we take money from. The vendors, why would they pay us a fee to come in and sell life insurance and then let somebody else that's already in the school sell life insurance? There's curriculum and materials like McGraw-Hill. If you're selling lesson plans, you're competing with McGraw-Hill, who sells lesson plans. And we get a lot of money from people like McGraw-Hill to come in and have access to our district. We take money from them and we buy from them, but we take money from them as well. And so that's when I talk about non-compete, about selling lesson plans. McGraw-Hill wants to sell you lesson plans. And we're taking money from McGraw-Hill to be able to have access to you in the district. They're paying us a fee.
Okay.
So all of those people in the traditional public school that come in and offer services to teachers, they've had to pay. They're on an approved vendor list, but they've had to pay for that access. We don't just say, yeah, come on in, and do your best.
Yeah.
No, we get a cut. Or we get a flat free.
All right. Thank you for the clarity, Dr. Lam.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. That's a good point. I didn't explain that one well. But you're not allowed to compete with any of the vendors that the district has approved to come and sell and provide goods and services in your school. You're not allowed to compete with them because they're paying a fee for that access. Good question. And here's one that happens a lot, and again, it's all fun and games till something goes wrong here, and that's tutoring for money. Employees are prohibited from tutoring for compensation students whom they exercise regular teaching, administrative, or supervised responsibility, or from tutoring for compensation during work hours, students for whom they do not exercise such responsibility. So if during your planning period, you tutor some kid for money, that's a no-no. You can't do that at all. But after school, if you have a kid that's in your school, let me say this again. If you have a kid who's in your school, you can't tutor him for money. Now you say, but I don't teach that. It doesn't make any difference. If you teach them, have administrative or supervised responsibility, and that's every kid in your building. You have administrative or supervised responsibility of every kid in your building. You cannot accept money for tutoring or coaching kids that go to your school. If you're in one of the 114 traditional school districts in North Carolina, you cannot accept money for working with those kids. Now, if it's somebody over here in the public school next door, that's perfectly fine. So if you're at Ranson Middle School and you're teaching there, and some kid from Eastway needs to be tutored, that's fine, but not a kid from Ranson. Even if he's not in your class or she's not in your class, doesn't matter. You have supervisory duties over that student. You cannot tutor them or coach them for pay. I had a assistant to the principal. We now call those deans, but back in the old days, when we would bring somebody up from a teacher level to do administrative duties, and pay them still as a classroom teacher. Many districts do that. They have different names for them. We call them, at that time, we called them assistant to the principal rather than assistant principals. They did assistant principal duties. But now I think everybody calls them deans, a dean of students. I have one of those who was not a certified administrator. And so you have to be careful as an administrator when you sign your contract to see what the non-compete clause in your contract in terms of what you can and can't do in terms of outside revenue income. As an administrator, you better look and see what's in your local district's your administrative contract locally. There's some additional clauses for administrators, and I encouraged him not to take pay for the kids at I told him you can't take pay for the kids here. Now, he was a track coach and he did private speed training. I don't know what that is, other than they put a rope around him and drag a tire around out on the field. But I guess that's, I guess you consider that to be. I hope Charles is not listening tonight. I never got it, but people would pay for it. And he would work with kids, but I had to tell him, now look, because you're still on teacher pay, you're allowed to run you're allowed to run your little speed business, but you can't do the kids here. It can only be kids at other schools. It can't be the kids at our school. You are prohibited from doing that. But now, had he been an assistant principal, he couldn't have done that at all, because it would have been any kid in the district he couldn't have taken money from. So you better make sure you see what the content of your contract. If you have some side business, or if you have people that you supervise, you better make sure you know what's in that contract in terms of non-compete. I'm really excited. And so, I encourage you when you sign your first administrative contract to read the fine print. Employees.
Dr. Lamb, is that limited to it being on school property?
No.
Okay.
No. That's that's anywhere.
I'm thinking if there is, like, in the district or in a town, there is a facility, not a facility, but a place like that has after school tutoring, and you have some of local teachers working there in the afternoons as a second job, how would that impact them?
They can't do their own students.
Okay.
They're not allowed to do that at all. Prohibited from tutoring compensation whom they exercise. So whether it's a private business or whether it's their private business, like Huntington Learning Center, they go over and work over there in the evening. They can't tutor their own kids. No.
Okay, I'm just asking that because I wanted to know if it was limited to it being on school premises or not.
No. Anywhere. Okay. Anywhere. Can't tutor your own kids for money. Can't do that. Whether it's at Huntington, whether it's in class after school, or whether it's at Sylvan Learning Center, or no, can't do that. Not your own kids. And pretty much every district in the state's got that policy. And if you think about it from an administrative perspective, what would stop somebody from saying, well, I'm not going to teach you this at school, but I'll, if you'll come and pay me, I'll teach you this.
Yeah.
That's a bad look. It's the optics. A lot of times it's the optics of financial issues that get you, not the money itself. It's the bad look. It's the optics.
Okay.
And so that one's pretty standard. Employees are prohibited from rendering services or engaging in, soliciting, or negotiating for, or promising to accept outside employment with private interests when they do business with the Board of Education or can influence the business relationship. You're prohibited from soliciting customers or clients or engaging in any private businesses or service on or in any Board of Education property, or using board vehicles, materials, supplies, resources, funds, or equipment for such activities, including for their own personal use, whether during or outside of regular work hours. You can't solicit customers for your private business on school. Even if you don't service that customer, you can't solicit them from school grounds. You can't do that. Say, for example, you've got a little real estate business on the side. You can't be soliciting clients from teachers or parents that come in the door, even though they're going to come to your real estate office for you to do your business. You can't solicit clients. I had one time that had a dog grooming business. Now, he didn't groom the dogs at school, but I had to have him stop passing out flyers and soliciting dog grooming customers at the school. I was just against the rules. He had a quite successful dog grooming business, and he had all these people walking in. Here's all these potential customers, but the rule is very clear: you can't solicit business, even though you're not going to conduct it. We weren't washing any dogs at the school. Some of the kids, we hosed the kids off from time to time, but we wasn't washing any dogs at the school. But he was, but it didn't matter. You couldn't solicit the dog cleaning business at the school. That's against the rules. And you have to be cognizant of these things as the school leader. Again, it might have been going on forever, but then when it goes bad, it comes back to you. Got to protect the shield. You can't put the school district at this kind of financial and legal risk is the whole idea. Let's go back to this one up here. Employees are prohibited from rendering services or engaging in, soliciting, or negotiating for, or promising to accept outside employment with private interests when those are doing business with the Board of Education. One of the things that happens regularly is somebody will come in and say, I'd like to get I'd like to get your business for the school pictures. I know you've been with Strawbridge forever, but I'd like to get your picture business. I've got some work that you could do. We could pay you to do some work, and there'd be some income opportunities for you too. Well, again, that's against the rules. You can't promise to work for or accept work or compensation for somebody in order for them to do business in the district. There came a time when the prime example of that is like vending machines. Pepsi versus Coke versus used to be Sundrop used to be a player in Charlotte. And there came a time when there was concern that principals had control over what vending machines came to their building, and some of those, there were vacation and other vacation opportunities and golf outings and other opportunities afforded by these companies, or one of the companies was offering some employment, some outside of employment activities. Again, you got to look at your contract. Non-complete, you can't take work. But this expressly forbids you from giving somebody access that wants to do business in the district, giving them access based on them giving you gifts or vacations or golf or some kind of outside employment. And that outside employment also extends to your family members. You've got let's say you've got a teenage son, he needs a part-time job. That's a pretty good job riding the Pepsi truck. So there can't be, again, it's the optics. There can't be any hint of impropriety here. And that's why all these rules are in place. You need to find out all of your policies. You need to read your contract when you become an administrator about the things you can and can't do financially. I would encourage you to do that. I have a couple of PowerPoints that I obviously am not going to get to tonight because I'm well over my time already. Let me see. But I would encourage you to look at these. I've got one on school-based budgeting here. Getting, spending, and accounting. This is the how-to. This kind of summarizes the things that I talked to you about, the sources of your income, and how to put together your local budget. This is kind of a how-to. And who should be involved, and what their level of involvement should be, and everybody's role in the budgeting process. This kind of summarizes the entire process for you. This is one of those tools you should add to your toolkit, because this one PowerPoint summarizes the whole deal for you. So this is a good one for you to put in your toolkit. I've also got one on school business administration. And this is more of a general overview from the district office level. But this one speaks to what I'll kind of bring it full circle here in my benediction, my closing here. This speaks to that selling, that you have to be able to sell your budget. Your budget has to support your school improvement plan, which is your vision for your school, but that you have to understand that your community and your parents and your faculty are all stakeholders, and you have to share that vision, and you have to communicate that vision, and that's pretty much this one is at a district level, but also can be applicable to the school level. And that last PowerPoint I showed you, you saw all those different stakeholders that were involved in creation of the local budget. And that's what these two are about, is really about your vision and about selling your vision and selling the idea of your school improvement plan and your budget, that people have to know how and why you're going to do what you're going to do with the money and the resources and the people that you have. Both from this one is for the district, the one I just showed you is locally, but they're basically about how do you involve all these different stakeholders in this process so that in the end you are able to achieve those goals and visions that you have. And a lot of it is you got to be a salesman. You've got to know your numbers, and you've got to share those numbers and the hows and the whys and why you're doing what you're doing. You have to be able. Budgeting is more than just the numbers. It's about sharing and selling your vision of where your school needs to go and what you need to do. And so when we talk about school budgets, yes, there's the dollars and cents side, and there's the micro political side of selling and sharing your vision and getting buy-in from your stakeholders. That's what this one is about. At the district level, the one I just showed you is about how to go about doing that at the local school level. About how to get that buy-in from your stakeholders as you move forward with your budget every year. All right. Questions you have for me on budgeting, school finances. I know I covered it quickly, but there's a lot of good reading that you can do. These materials that I've given you here kind of summarize how in a micro-political way that you put these things together, and you look at budgeting as more than just dollars and cents. And that's, if you do that, then I'm happy that you understand that budgeting is more than just dollars and cents, that it's about getting buy-in from all of your stakeholders. All righty. Anything for the good of the group before I sign off tonight? I apologize for taking so long, but we just had to work through all those laws tonight. That stuff is not debatable. You have to follow that stuff. All right. I'll upload this one once it processes, and it'll be available in an hour or so. I will see you in 2 weeks from tonight. Y'all all have a good holiday. We had our turkey dinner at the college today, and so I'm a little sleepy already. I don't think I'll make it much past 9 o'clock tonight. Don't eat too much turkey, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.